Hey everyone, it's Scott Rustrolitz here on June 1st with today's edition of the Listen to Learn podcast. As always, thank you for listening. And at the start, I'd just like to again say if you enjoy our videos, please subscribe to the channel so you'll always be alerted every time we release new ones. And if you think you have friends or family who would enjoy the videos as well, please share them on with them. Greatly appreciate all of your support. So with that, I want to focus on a couple of big stories of the day. Following up from yesterday, when we said it was highly likely Trump would exit the Paris plan and explain why we thought that was a good idea. Today, he did formally do that. And I think the line of the speech for me was, quote, "I was elected to represent Pittsburgh, not Paris." And that pretty perfectly encapsulates the American first agenda that he's laid forth. It's why I think that actually that doing this is going to work quite popularly with all the voters. He turned from Obama to himself in states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, West Virginia, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Iowa. And it's just, again, the sense of we're going to do what's in the interest of the American worker and not what foreign and media elites want us to do. I also want to really focus on one misconception that you're seeing being pushed everywhere in the media, and that's that he's turning the clock back big time and he's going to try and extend the life of oil and other carbon and historic uses of energy instead of and push away renewables. But that's not really what's going on here. What we're really talking about is whether or not we should be subsidizing a new energy that is not economic at the expense of older forms of energy that are economic? Or rather, should we let market forces determine what types of energy we use? And the fact of the matter is, market forces have moved to a natural movement away from carbon-based energy. Emissions are down to 1992 levels, and this is all pre-Paris. It's not like, from 1992 to 2014, emissions were going down. Why were they going down? Because cars are naturally more efficient. Houses are naturally getting more efficient, so the energy intensity of everyday life declines. That's a natural, continuing thing that's going to happen, and is not something that removing ourselves from the Paris Agreement is going to stop happening. It's not as though our utilities are suddenly going to get any less innovative. It's not as though new technology companies are not going to be created. What we're talking about is we should not make American consumers pay more for energy that is not economic, while in other countries that are not going to actually end up working under the framework of a voluntary program and instead are going to continue to emit more carbon than they currently do, you end up making it higher energy feedstock costs for American manufacturers, for American consumers. And if you're a wealthy coastal elite who has money to spare, it doesn't matter if your electricity bill is up 5% because of onerous government regulation. But if you're someone who's struggling to make ends meet and energy costs are a significant part of your life, that extra 5% is a significant hit to your disposable personal income. So it's all a matter of who we're prioritizing. And it's funny, it's ironic that today, on the day Trump removes ourselves from the Paris Agreement, U.S. crude oil exports hit a record high of 1.3 million barrels per day. And again, it speaks to the fact that the U.S. is becoming more and more productive in producing oil. We're the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. And why would we want to proactively cut off the growth of these industries? Just like no one is arguing we should subsidize natural gas and coal, all we're saying is we should not go out of our way to subsidize other sources of energy at their expense. We should let market forces play out. And thanks to the innovative spirit of Americans, you're already seeing emissions fall. And there's no need to go above and beyond that when you have other countries that won't. And I think the big takeaway for me, and I mean this in the best possible way, is that Trump is a wrecking ball. And that's, I think, really the framework with which you have to think about him. And he was elected to be a wrecking ball by people who are sick of the system, and they want a guy to come in and blow the system up. And that's exactly what he's doing. We've had for 30 years a status quo built by cultural and leftist, globalist elites that have built these norms that people are sick of. Norms like that traditional energy jobs are bad, that manufacturing is doomed to an inevitable decline, even though in countries like Germany it's thriving, that unfettered immigration and not checking immigrants is a good thing to do, even though you've seen how problematic it is in Europe, that all cultures are equal. that we're wrong to judge a place like Pakistan, which up until a few months ago allowed honor killings, as any different or worse than our own. And people in this country, the silent majority, are sick of being told by elites that this is the system. And they wanted to elect someone that is going to ignore the pressure from the system and go in and blow it up. And that's exactly what Trump has done. He's a wrecking ball that's come in and said, no, a lot of these assumptions are a lot of bull. We can make manufacturing good again. We're only going to allow immigrants in here if it's in the interest of the American public. We're not going to sign on to international deals like the Paris Climate Deal, even though every single foreign leader pressured him to do so, because it's not in America's interest. And we're going to rethink the way we do things. Now, admittedly, when you're electing a wrecking ball to push through and bust things up, some glass is going to get broken along the way. At times, does he send a tweet or two? He shouldn't. Absolutely. They end up being distractions. But sometimes you have to break an egg to make an omelet. And I think that it's about voters who are saying we want something bigger being done here, and we're going to tolerate some of the president's flaws. And today was a perfect example of a president who was elected to be a wrecking ball and blow up this globalist system, doing exactly that. And the shock and horror you're hearing from the media and from the left is just so exaggerated. And I think at the end of the day, much of this will backfire. And my bet will be, if you look at his approval rating polls in a week from today, and we'll see, they'll be a couple points higher than they are today, because American people want someone who is going to represent them and not Paris. Moving on to a couple other stories, it was announced this morning that Jim Comey, former FBI director, will be testifying in front of Congress next week. I think the key takeaways for me on this is that we know he was cleared by the special prosecutor Bob Mueller to testify. Now, if Bob Mueller thought there was serious potential for criminal charges, he probably would have barred Comey from testifying. That's at least the historical norm. So if anything, I think this again speaks to the fact that nothing illegal happened with the firing of James Comey. And I do hope and urge senators to ask him why he said in just 2 months ago that he never felt political pressure to end an investigation. And he said that under oath. And if he says anything in his testimony that would contradict that next week, he should be pushed very hard as to why he said the opposite previously, and whether or not he actually is perjuring himself. So that is something he should face a lot of pressure, because he's on the record. Never felt any political pressure, never seen a government official try to obstruct an investigation. And that's something that's really important to keep in mind, because it's one thing to write something in a note after you've been fired. It's another to say something under oath at the risk of perjury. And last, the other news is that Moody's and S&P, credit rating agencies, downgraded the state of Illinois' creditworthiness to one notch above junk, and it may at some point say that the credit status of Illinois is junk. And why is that? They've gone 2 years without passing a budget. You have mass dysfunction with $14 billion in unpaid bills. And the budget impasse, at the end of the day, you have to blame both the governor, Bruce Rauner, and Madigan, the Speaker of the House, a Republican and a Democrat respectively. At the end of the day, buck stops with them, and you have to at some point be able to pass budgets. But what you really have is a state that's been run for Democrats for decades, and it's been completely run into the ground. You've got $100 billion plus pension liability, massive structural budget deficit, high taxes, low growth, so people are leaving the state in mass, and you really risk here being a death spiral. And this is something that you're going to hear more and more headlines about in Illinois' problems. And like I said, you have to blame the current administration and current legislature for being unable to do anything, so you're now left with a situation where you're basically running a government on an IOU basis. But their pension problems, you could make an argument, is analogous to the Social Security and Medicare problems the federal government has, where you make these large promises that you're not funding, and at some point, problems come home, and you have to deal with them. And Illinois is at that point of reckoning, and the federal government needs to ensure that it acts proactively to deal with its long-term entitlement problems, so that we don't face the problems Illinois has. Because if you keep raising taxes, as you see with Illinois, your tax base leaves to other more competitive places. So those are really the three big stories that I saw today. As always, thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast. You can also follow us on Facebook at the Listen and Learn podcast, and follow me on Twitter at Read and Learn. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.